what these group experiences allow the authors to do is to really dive a little deeper with their readers into the content, into the resources, into the framework, so that people can really apply it and kind of take it into their lives and do what you as the author imagined they would do with it when they read the book. Hi, authors. Welcome to the Book Desserts podcast series. I'm your host, Kerry Dobson. I'm so excited to have you here as we explore the sweet side of author-led groups. This podcast is for you if you're already an author or you have a book in the making. And when you think about the impact that you want to have, yes, you have your book and you want to go beyond your book and you want some of that work that you're going to do out in the world to include groups. I hope you're ready for this tasty exploration of author-led groups. Let's jump into this next episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first episode in our podcast series. So excited to have you here. I'm going to use this opportunity with this first podcast to give you a bit of an idea of who I am. More importantly, what you're going to get out of this podcast series. I'm going to talk a little bit about who I work with, why I work with them, and how I help them. So this podcast series is designed for authors who are looking to kind of go beyond their book and introduce group programming to their community, to their readers, in an effort to help their readers go a little bit deeper into what their books are about and the frameworks and the tools and the resources, while also building a business around their book and their intellectual property. So first question you probably have is, who am I and why am I doing this? So my name is Kerry Dobson, and the organization I'm with is a family business, JJ DAC Incorporated. And one of the things that we do is we actually help authors to design and lead their own group programs, whether that's a author-led book club, whether that's a group program that's, 6 weeks long, 6 months long, a whole month long, a whole year long, or even certification programs where you're taking your expertise in your book and you're actually training other people to take that what you know and your frameworks and your resources out into the work that they do in the world. So we really focus on the group environment, whether that's in person or online, and really how do you create these programs or these group experiences so that people are learning and they're engaging and they're healing and they're transforming and they're really just getting that sense of community that so many of our readers are looking for. And they're getting the support to go deeper and to really take what it is you talk about in your book and bring it into their life, bring it into their relationships, bring it into their business, whatever your area of expertise is. So how did I get to be standing here talking to you today? Great question. So I won't go into my entire career, but the last over 15 years I spent in learning and development in different organizations, national, multinational organizations. And really where I focused and where I was able to provide the most value is helping different departments and different areas create group programs for employees so that they could do better at their job. I found myself in an awkward position. I got on a plane February 3rd, 2020 from Canada and moved to the US with the organization I was with to do the work that I had been doing for 7+ years. So you can imagine where this story might go. Anyway, I moved. I had about a month and a half before the pandemic really got started, found myself in lockdown. And by the end of May, I was laid off, COVID layoff, and I had 60 days to get out of the United States and head back to Canada during a global pandemic. So the reason I share this part of the story is I had changed jobs in my career before. I went from different organizations based on the opportunity and the experiences I could have. And if I was not in a country that I couldn't work in, during a global pandemic, when the layoff happened, I likely would have just kind of picked my socks up and, found another place to do the work that I was doing. But as I was, packing up this short-lived dream that I had and driving across the country during a pandemic, I had a lot of windshield time. I had a lot of time to really think. And, I asked myself for the first time in a really long time, what is it that I really want to do? And what I discovered and realized was I loved what I was doing. I loved helping people to create these great group experiences. I loved helping people to get the tools they need to be successful. I just no longer loved who I was doing it for. And what I mean by that is I was working with executives who had an idea of what people needed. And so we would create programs around that idea. But then when you actually took it to people, oftentimes there was a disconnect between what the executive group thought was needed and what was actually needed. And so I decided, how do I use the skills that I have and all this experience and education that I have to help people who are out here in the world doing work to help people grow and transform and learn and just have better lives and better careers and better experiences. And so I was able to kind of take those skills and experience and education I had and turn it into working with coaches and authors. Now, this podcast series is specifically for authors because I think there's this really unique opportunity for authors. What I have not written a book, but what I know from the authors that I know and that I've worked with is the amount of effort it takes to get those thoughts from your mind out onto the page and get this body of work that might be one book or many books to really help people understand what it is you're trying to help them with. And when you're doing that hard work and you're getting up and you're sitting in front of that keyboard day in and day out, you have this image of the impact that you're going to have. You have this idea of how you're going to influence people and how you're going to help them to make those changes. And what many of the authors that I talk to ultimately discover is, yes, when they launch their book, there's kind of this initial interest in the book, and maybe they're lucky and they sell thousands of books. Not all authors have that experience, but there isn't kind of this built-in way of saying, how do I take this work further? And so there's lots of different options for authors when they hit that point. So they can, start speaking on stages so that people can become more familiar with their books. They can have a podcast like this. They can go on different podcasts. And one of the other things that they can do is create group experiences around the content in the book. And so what these group experiences allow the authors to do is to really dive a little deeper with their readers into the content, into the resources, into the framework, so that people can really apply it and kind of take it into their lives and do what you as the author imagined they would do with it when they read the book. But what you quickly discover is just because we read it doesn't mean we do it. And so what I do is I take my background, which includes that over 15 years in learning and development, a master's of education in workplace and adult learning, and all of my experience as a facilitator at different post-secondary education executive programs. And I help authors to say, okay, what is it that I want to build? Is it that I want to do an author-led book club, which might be, just inviting your community to read the book along with you and, get the opportunity to ask you questions? Or is it that you want to dive a little bit deeper into certain parts of the book that you have and help people really apply it and take the tools that you gave them in the book and have them go back to their life or their business, their relationships, and really try the things out and then come back and get feedback and be able to ask questions and be able to support them? Or do you have a book and a framework that you think, this would be really useful for other coaches or consultants or other people in the world to be really skilled up on so that they can use it in the work that they do? And that's a certification program. So I can help authors with all of those things. But what's unique about kind of the author experience of this is that vision that you had when you were writing the book oftentimes included that opportunity to work with other people in groups to really be seeing what it is that they can do with your work. So that's kind of how I came to be. I joke that I'm an accidental entrepreneur. And my focus on authors is just because you've done the really hard work of sitting down to get that book together. Now it's just about repurposing. It's about cutting it down. So it's a lot easier of a lift to take your book and say, let's create some group experiences than it is for, example, if you had no book and you're kind of starting from scratch. So that's how I came to be doing what I'm doing now. The purpose of this podcast is really authors who are trying to build a business around their book. They're trying to grow something beyond their book. I find don't have a lot of time. They're doing a lot of different things. And so when we offer, free workshops or paid workshops, there just isn't that much time for you to kind of go and take part in that workshop and get a tiny part of the information that we have to share with you. So the idea behind this podcast series is you can listen from this episode all the way to the end of episode 12, and you'll get a really good understanding of the process and some of the things to think about. So the way that I'm approaching this podcast series is there's 4 different episode types. The first one is kind of information, where I'm going to talk to you about kind of, different resources that you can use, different approaches, different frameworks that you can think about when it comes to kind of taking your book and creating a group experience from it. I'm also going to do interviews with other authors who have created group experiences or certification programs around their book, so you can hear kind of what their process was and what they did. I'm also going to talk about a couple different books that are out there that many of them you'll be familiar with, and say these are some ideas that you could have if you had a book similar to this around group experiences you could create. And then the final one is I'm going to invite some of my friends and colleagues to come in and talk about different components of a group program outside of how do you kind of create it and guide people through it, but instead, for example, how do you market it? How does that look different than how you marketed your book? And so those are the 4 formats. I'm going to do 3 episodes of each. This one, of course, being an information one. And again, the whole goal is that you can quickly and easily listen to this podcast series, get a really good idea of some of the things that you could do to start creating your own group experiences. What I'd encourage you to do now that you've listened to this episode is go listen to the other episodes. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episodes in this podcast series. Well, authors, that concludes this episode of the Book Desserts podcast series. If you're ready to start exploring how to go beyond your book with group programs, I encourage you to visit our website at jjdak.com. That's jjdak.com. On there, you can download our Design Your Groups with Ease workbook, which has some great checklists and questions you can ask yourself when you're thinking about designing your own group. If you're more interested in having a conversation with me, your host, Kerry Dobson, you can go ahead and book a complimentary group program clarity session right there on the website. I'd love to have a conversation with you about your book and about your group that you'd like to put out into the world. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with your own book desserts.